We are welcome to biology class. My name is Ejiro Efere. In today's lesson, we shall be looking at the topic, the maintenance of internal environment. In the theme, Organism at Work. This is the first part of the lesson, and in this first part, we shall be learning about homeostasis and the organs involved in homeostasis. So I'd like you to pay attention because at the end of today's class, you should be able to define homeostasis, list the main organs involved in homeostasis, and identify the various factors that are regulated in homeostasis. You should also be able to describe the structure of the kidney. The environment where living things are found has certain factors that changes from time to time. These changes are seen in the aquatic environment as well as in the terrestrial environment. For example, in the terrestrial environment where humans, plants, and other animals dwell, a factor such as temperature changes from the normal level which is suitable for the survival of these organisms to a level that is either too high or too cold for survival. In the aquatic environment also, the concentration of certain substances dissolved in the water could change from the normal level to levels that are either too high or too cold for survival. All of these drastic changes have different dangerous effects in the bodies of living organisms. These effects could cause harm to the bodies, and they may also lead to death. How do living things survive in their environment then? To survive in the midst of these changes, living organisms must maintain a steady internal environment within their bodies, regardless of what goes on in the external environment. The bodies of living organisms are constantly regulated in order to create a fair, suitable internal environment within their bodies. They do this constantly, regulating their internal environment to ensure that there is a constant state of conditions within them. This brings us to the term homeostasis. It is in regards to maintaining a constant internal environment that we have this term. What is homeostasis? Homeostasis is simply the maintenance of a constant internal environment within the bodies of living organisms. The internal environment here refers to the substances surrounding the cells and the substances within the cells of living organisms. If you remember, the cells of living organisms have various substances within them. These substances are dissolved in the cytoplasmic fluid. The fluid is called cytosol. So they are dissolved in the cytosol. In the bodies of multicellular organisms as well, the cells are submerged in fluids. So the cells are surrounded by fluids, different kinds of fluids with various substances dissolved in them. As you can see, in between these cells, there are various types of substances dissolved in fluid. So we can say, within the bodies of living organisms, the cells contain fluid at the inside, and the cells are also surrounded by fluid. So we can say the internal environment of living organisms consists of fluids. These fluids are also called body fluids. So the internal environment of living organisms is the body fluids and other items, of course, that may be dissolved in the body fluids. All organisms, all living organisms, regulate their internal environment. They do this to keep it constant by adjusting constantly to the various changes that occur in the body fluid. So there are various changes that go on in these body fluids, and living organisms must ensure that they regulate the changes and ensure that the body fluid is kept at a constant level, or it's maintained at a constant conditions. Now let's look at some of the factors that change in the body fluids. Factors such as the water volume, acid-base level, osmotic pressure, the temperature, the content of mineral substances within this body fluid, the sugar level of the body fluids, and the concentration of certain elements such as carbon dioxide, oxygen, and nitrogenous waste substances. All of these factors change from time to time. They change from mild values to values that are too high and may not be suitable for survival. Homeostasis carries out its function through a control mechanism. The internal environment of living organisms are regulated by the control mechanism. What is the control mechanism about? It's simply a mechanism that involves the activities of various tissues and organs working together to ensure stability in the body. These tissues and organs work together to ensure that the body system is always balanced and healthy conditions are maintained in the body. Homeostasis goes on in all living systems. Let's take a look at homeostasis, or the control mechanism, in the bodies of vertebrates. In vertebrates, the control mechanism is controlled basically by the brain. So the brain here is the control center. You can call it the control center or chief officer of the control mechanism, whatever you want to call it, but just remember that the brain is in control. The brain is assisted by the endocrine glands. So the control mechanism in vertebrates is regulated basically by the brain and endocrine glands. How does this mechanism work? In the control mechanism, the brain, which is the control center, receives signals from various parts of the body, such as from a tissue, an organ, or any part of the body. When it receives this signal, what does it do? The brain stimulates the endocrine glands. Let me mention here that endocrine glands are glands that secrete hormones. They are located in various parts of the body. They secrete hormones. So the endocrine glands secrete hormones. These hormones are also referred to as chemical messengers. They are chemicals that carry messages to various parts of the body. So when the endocrine glands secrete hormones, the hormones carry responses in form of messages to a tissue, an organ that needs to effect the correction to that change. So when the message gets to this tissue or organ, they make the necessary adjustment, as the tissues and organs make necessary adjustments in line with the messages contained in the hormones. When they do this, stability is restored to the body. So let's take a look at how the control mechanism operates. Whenever the body is stable, that's in a healthy system where everything is normal, we say the body is balanced. That is, homeostasis here is very okay. The body is balanced. But whenever there is a disturbance, whenever there is a change, a stimulus, it disturbs homeostasis and causes an imbalance. So this here is an imbalance. This stimulus is detected quickly by a tissue or an organ. This tissue or organ can be called receptor. They are change receptors. The tissues and organs, having received or detected this change, quickly send a message to the control center, which is the brain. They send a message to the brain, and the brain understands that, oh, there is trouble in the body. Oh, there's a change. Oh, there's a stimulus. I need to act. What does the brain do? As a control center, the brain gives out information or sends a message to another group of tissues or organs, or even the same group of tissues and organs, which are called effectors. What do the effectors do? They effect the change. They effect correction. So the effectors receive the message from the brain, and the brain tells them, there is a disturbance in the body. Go on and carry out this correction. The effector tissues or effector organs go ahead to correct the change. When they correct the change, stability is restored, and we can say homeostasis is restored. The moment they correct the change, the body is restored back to balance. This is how the control mechanism operates. Now, we said hormones are chemical messengers, and they are used frequently in the control mechanisms. These hormones carry responses in form of messages from the endocrine gland to the organs and tissues that are responsible for correcting changes. These organs and tissues make necessary adjustments based on the information that is contained in the hormones. And with this information, they restore stability in the body. The control mechanism here regulates the body in a particular way that is called feedback regulatory process. I'd like you to pay attention to that word, feedback. Feedback regulatory process is a process of regulation whereby the response to a stimulus or the response to a change has an effect on the rate of the stimulus. This sounds funny, right? Let me explain what I mean. Let's say we have a stimulus called cold. So, cold could be a stimulus. When you feel cold, you can call that cold a stimulus. The brain detects that the body is cold. This is the control center now. The brain detects that the body is cold. The brain goes on to send messages to the muscles and tissues of the body. Let's say muscles and tissues. The muscles and tissues understand that the brain is trying to respond to cold. What happens? The muscles and tissues begin to shiver. So you begin to shiver when a stimulus such as cold is in the body. You begin to shiver. When you begin to shiver, what do? You try to put on cold-preventing clothes. Let's say this is cold pea clothes. And you also try to take hot food substances. When you do this, your body begins to get warm. Your temperature increases. It keeps increasing until the cold disappears. What happened in this situation? It means that as the body temperature began to increase, a message was sent to the center where cold came from, and the message told cold, you can no longer operate in this body. Our temperature or the body temperature is now normal. So cold, you can leave. Feedback means that the change or the effect of the change must send a message back to that stimulus that started it to either increase the stimulus or decrease the stimulus. We are going to see more examples as we learn further. This feedback response could be negative or positive. That means it may reduce or increase the initial stimulus. So the summary of the feedback response is seen in this chart, whereby a stimulus, you can also regard this as a change, a stimulus that disturbs the normal functional system of the body, gets to receptor organs. Remember, we said this receptor organ senses the change or the stimulus. They send a signal to the control center, which is usually the brain. The control center, in response to the stimulus, begin to send messages in order to correct the change. Now, it is a feedback response because the changes or the correction made by the effector organs must return back to the stimulus to feed it with a message saying you can either stop or you can increase your activity. That is all about the feedback response. Feedback response may be positive or negative. That is, it may reduce or increase the rate of the stimulus. By this, we have two types of feedback response. We have negative feedback response and positive feedback response. This depends on what they do or the function they carry out on the stimulus. Negative feedback response is seen when the response to a stimulus decreases the rate of the stimulus, or when the response to a stimulus causes that stimulus to stop completely. An example of a negative feedback response is seen in this chart. This is a negative feedback response that occurs when our temperature rises beyond normal. It also occurs when our body temperature goes below normal. This is the first stage. This stimulus here is a rise in body temperature above 37.2 degrees centigrade. So the environment becomes hot and your body temperature rises above normal. The receptors, which are temperature sensors, let's just call them temperature sensors, located in various parts of the body, they detect this increase in body temperature. They send an information quickly to the brain. They do this quickly because a high temperature is not so good for the body. The brain receives this information about the rise in temperature. What does the brain do? It quickly sends a command through various processes to the effector organs. These are organs that effect the corrections. The effector organs, in order to carry out a negative feedback, must also send a signal to the place or the point where the initial stimulus began. So let's say the initial stimulus began from the skin. It sends a message back to the skin, telling the skin, it's okay, we are in control of this, body temperature, you can now go back to normal. So the body temperature goes back to normal and homeostasis is restored. Remember, in this case, the signal told the initial temperature to stop working, or it reduced it to normal. It reduced the increasing body temperature to a value of 37.2 degrees centigrade, which is normal and suitable for the body. So because the response to that stimulus decreased or reduced the initial stimulus, we can call that a feedback response. We can also see feedback response when we are hungry. When we are hungry, or when the cells and tissues of our body are low, short of glucose, they send signals to the brain. The brain begins to cause you to feel hungry and you want to eat. The moment you begin to eat, and when you get to the point where it seems like you're full, what do you notice? It seems like you have strength immediately. This is because a feedback response was sent to the tissues and cells of the body, telling them to, hey, relax. We now have glucose in the body because this person has just eaten. So it decreased or stopped the rate of hunger. That is a negative feedback response. How about positive feedback response? Positive feedback occurs when the response to a stimulus increases the rate of the stimulus. It is just the opposite of a negative feedback response. The response to a change or a stimulus causes the initial stimulus to increase its rate. Instead of the stimulus to stop or reduce, it will increase until a point where it has to be stopped. Let me also mention here that what usually happens in most biological systems is the negative feedback response. We have just few cases that involves a positive feedback response. An example of such case is seen during the delivery of a baby. Now, during the delivery of a baby, there's a hormone which is usually released to cause labor. This hormone is called oxytocin. Now, what does oxytocin do? Usually, when a woman is in labor, a pregnant woman is in labor, oxytocin is released or secreted to cause the cervix to contract. When the cervix contracts, it begins to open up to give access to the baby to come out. So as the cervix continues to contract, and as the baby makes attempts to come out of the cervix, more oxytocin is released from the muscle. The brain causes an increased level or increased release of oxytocin. So oxytocin level increases the more as the muscles of the cervix continues to dilate. This goes on for a while until the baby comes out successfully from the cervix. This is a case of positive feedback response, where the response to the stimulus caused the stimulus to increase its rates. I hope you understand that about the negative and positive feedback response. Now back to our homeostasis. Let's look at the organs that are involved in homeostasis. Remember, we said in homeostasis, several tissues and muscles work together to ensure stability in the body. These organs involved or include the kidney, the liver, skin, lungs, and all the endocrine glands. Don't forget the brain. The brain is the control center. These organs work together to ensure that the internal environment of living organisms is constant. Now, let me also add that these are not the only organs that carry out homeostatic functions. As a matter of fact, all the tissues and cells of the body work together to ensure that the body is always stable. These organs and tissues that are involved in homeostasis do their best to ensure that an organism is kept healthy. They do their best to ensure that the internal environment is always balanced. But sometimes there are cases that may be beyond the homeostatic control, and at such cases, such a person falls sick. So we fall sick when our homeostatic control mechanism can no longer handle some of the changes that go on in our bodies. So we are going to look at some of these organs, and we are going to begin with the kidney. We're going to take these organs in different lessons. So in this lesson, we'll begin with the kidney. What is a kidney? Have you seen a kidney before? This is a kidney. Take a good look at the kidney. The kidneys are bean-shaped organs that are responsible for the formation of urine. Don't they look like bean? We say it's bean-shaped because it looks like the seed of a bean. They are responsible for the formation of urine. Beyond the formation of urine, kidneys perform several homeostatic functions. And these functions have been grouped into three. They are regulating the concentration of electrolytes in the blood. The kidneys also help to maintain the fluid levels of the body. The kidneys also help to maintain the pH balance of the blood. How do they do this? The kidneys carry out their homeostatic functions by 1. The removal of nitrogenous waste products. Remember, the kidney is an excretory organ. What does it excrete? It excretes urine. What is the urine composed of? Nitrogenous waste products and other substances. Examples of these nitrogenous waste products are urea, uric acid, and ammonia. Don't forget, these substances are found in different organisms. For humans, we excrete the urea. The kidneys also help to carry out homeostatic functions by regulating the osmotic pressure of the blood or of the body. They do this by controlling the amount of water in the blood, controlling the amount of salts such as potassium, sodium, and chloride ions in the blood. The kidneys also help to control or regulate osmotic pressure by controlling the amount of acids or bases that are present in the body fluids, in the blood as well. So as we proceed, we are going to learn how the kidneys carry out these functions. Lest I forget, the kidney is a paired organ. It means we have 2 kidneys in our bodies. And these kidneys carry out a lot of excretory processes. Let's take a look at the structure of a kidney. What is the kidney made up of? The kidneys are located first in the abdominal cavity. Where is the abdominal cavity? The whole of this region, your abdomen. That is where the kidney is found. It is found on both sides of the spine. Let's take a look at it. On both sides, the spine is somewhere here, central to the body. Then we are saying it is found on both sides of the spine. This is the second kidney. The kidney is also located behind the stomach and the intestines. This means that we have the stomach at the front, then behind the stomach and the intestines, somewhere at the back part of the abdominal cavity, you will find the 2 kidneys. So don't forget where the kidneys are located. Each human kidney, that's each human adult kidney, someone like me, my kidney is about 12 centimeters long and about 6 centimeters wide. The kidney is an organ. It is made up of cells and tissues, so it must also receive blood. Beyond that, the kidney performs its functions on blood. So blood flows into the kidney through the renal artery. You can see the artery colored red for our arteries. And blood, processed blood, leaves the kidney through the renal vein. And of course, our vein is colored in blue. Renal artery and renal veins. Beyond the renal arteries and veins, the kidney itself is made up of 3 major parts. They are the cortex, the medulla, and the pelvis. We're going to learn about these 3 parts, one after the other. We'll begin with the cortex. The cortex. The cortex is the outer part of the kidney. This is what the cortex looks like. The outer part of the kidney, the whole of this region, is the cortex. The cortex consists of long tubes of blood vessels and other structures. Let me mention here that the whole of the kidney, every part of the kidney consists of long tubes of blood vessels because the kidney receives a large volume of blood supply. So beginning with the cortex, we have long tubes of blood vessels. These vessels extend down into the medulla and they go between the medulla to form renal pyramids. They go into the medulla to form renal pyramid. The part of the medulla where these renal pyramids are formed is between the renal columns. We'll get to learn about that as we proceed to the medulla. The medulla here is the middle part of the kidney. Can you locate the medulla? We say it is the middle part of the kidney. I'll circle the medulla. The whole of this region is the medulla, the middle part of the kidney. The medulla also consists of long tubes of blood vessels. It is made up of lobes called the renal pyramids. Where are the lobes? These are the lobes. There are several lobes, about 8 to 9 or more lobes in a kidney. These are the renal pyramids. The renal pyramids, as I mentioned earlier, are made of long tubes of blood vessels. The blood vessels collect blood that has been filtered. They receive the filtered blood. That's all they do. They receive filtered blood. Between each lobes, between each renal column, so between each renal pyramid, that's between each of these lobes, is the renal column. You can see in between the lobes. So we can say the medulla has the renal pyramids and the renal columns. And I mentioned earlier that their function is to receive filtered blood. The third part of the kidney is the pelvis. This pelvis can also be referred to as the renal pelvis. The renal pelvis is just a cavity. It is a funnel-shaped cavity through which urine, this is the pelvis, it's a cavity through which urine passes from the kidney to the ureter. Remember, after urine has been formed in the kidney, it is transported through the ureter to the urinary bladder, and from the bladder it is excreted. So the pelvis is the funnel-shaped cavity that carries the urine from the kidney to the ureter. That is the function of the pelvis. So the renal pelvis extends to the upper part of the ureter, and the ureter carries urine from the kidney to the urinary bladder for excretion. Now, beyond the cortex, the medulla, and the renal pelvis, there's an important structure that we must always mention whenever we talk of the kidney. This structure is called the nephron. Can you pronounce it? Nephron. The nephron is a major structure in the kidneys that filters blood to produce urine. As a matter of fact, the nephron is the functional unit of the kidney. This is where all the functions of the kidneys are performed. So the structure that carries out the function in the kidney is the nephron. I'm sure you may be wondering where this nephron is located. You will find out. What does the nephron do? It regulates the concentration of water and soluble substances that are dissolved in water, such as sodium, calcium, etc. It does this by filtering the blood, excreting unwanted substances, and reabsorbing substances that are desired by the body back into the blood. Let's find out what the nephron looks like. There are over 1 million tiny nephrons in each kidney. These nephrons are found, or they are scattered all over the kidney. They extend from the cortex to the medulla and down to the pelvis. Let's take a look at what the nephron looks like. I hope you can see this kidney. If you take a portion, let's say we cut out a portion such as this, we will have this. If you look deeply, these tiny structures here are the nephrons. So the nephron is scattered all over the kidney. The nephron consists of two main parts. It consists of the glomerulus and the nephron tubule. So this is what the nephron looks like. We say it has two parts. It has the glomerulus and the nephron tubule. The glomerulus, which is the first part of the nephron, the glomerulus is made up of a network of capillaries. So this portion, can you see this circular portion, is the glomerulus. It receives blood directly from a blood vessel. So it is made up of a network of capillaries. This is what an enlarged glomerulus looks like. We said it is made up of a network of capillaries. These are the capillaries. Remember what capillaries are, right? They are tiny blood vessels. So these are the capillaries located in the glomerulus. The glomerulus also has a cup-shaped organ called the glomerular capsule or the Bowman's capsule. Bowman's capsule or glomerular capsule. The Bowman's capsule is the cup-shaped part of the glomerulus. Doesn't it look like a cup? So that is the Bowman's capsule, and these are the capillaries in the glomerulus. What does the glomerulus do? So what is the function of the glomerulus? First, the capillaries located in the glomerulus filter the blood. This is their function. They filter blood. So when the capillaries receive blood, let's say these are the vessels, these are the blood vessels through which blood enters the glomerulus. The capillaries have tiny openings that filter the blood. And as they filter the blood, they retain the protein and the blood cells. Then they release the fluid and other substances dissolved in the blood. So the capillaries ensure that proteins and blood cells do not leave them, but they allow fluid and other substances to pass out of their tissues into the Bowman's capsule. So these are the fluid and other substances leaving the capillary as the blood is being filtered. The filtered blood, we won't call it blood anymore. We can call it filtered fluid or filtered urine or even filtrates. You can call it glomerular filtrates. So the filtered urine or the glomerular filtrate move into the Bowman's capsule. They move into the capsule from the capillaries, and from the capsule they flow down to the nephron tubule, which is the second part of the nephron. So let's look at the nephron tubule. That's the part that continues from the glomerulus. The nephron tubule. So this is the glomerulus, and the whole of this coiled tube here is the nephron tubule. The nephron tubule is very long and it has several parts. At the nephron tubules, substances such as sodium, water, potassium, glucose, hydrogen, and bicarbonate ions, even drugs, are carefully selected. All of these substances were left in the urine that got to the Bowman's capsule. So as they got to the nephron tubule selects them carefully. In the process of this selection, some substances are reabsorbed back into the blood. The substances that are required or desired by the body are reabsorbed back into the blood, and some other unwanted substances that are already in the blood are secreted into the urine for excretion. So two basic functions occur in the nephron tubules. First is reabsorption, and the second is secretion. Substances are either reabsorbed from the fluid or they are secreted into the fluid. So if you can see, the nephron tubules have several channels. It's a tissue through which substances are either secreted or reabsorbed. As the fluid flows from the nephron tubule, it moves down to the renal pelvis. From the renal pelvis, the fluid gets to the ureter and it flows to the urinary bladder where it is excreted. The nephron tubule has 4 basic parts, and these parts carry out different functions, and they are not far from reabsorption and secretion. What are the parts? We have the proximal convoluted tubules, we have the loop of Henle, we have the distal convoluted tubules, and the collecting ducts. The beginning part is the proximal convoluted tubules. As it goes down and begins to form a U-shaped tube, we call it the loop of Henle, loop of H, or loop of Henle. Then as it goes up again, it becomes the distal convoluted tubule. Distal convoluted tubule. And as it comes down to this point, it becomes the collecting ducts. Collecting D we can refer to. So it has 4 parts. What happens at these 4 points? First, at the proximal convoluted tubules, we see reabsorption of nutrients. So the proximal convoluted tubule is responsible for reabsorbing nutrients such as glucose, vitamins, and any other form of nutrients. It also reabsorbs plasma protein that may have entered into the nephron tubules in error. It also helps to excrete hydrogen ions. So what happens there? Nutrients, vitamins, and plasma proteins are reabsorbed. Hydrogen ion is excreted. The loop of Henle. The loop of Henle helps to reabsorb water, sodium, and chloride ions. The loop of Henle also secretes hydrogen ions. How about the distal convoluted tubule? The distal convoluted tubule reabsorbs water. It also reabsorbs sodium, but it secretes hydrogen ions and potassium ions. And lastly, the collecting dot. The collecting dot, which is the end part of the nephron tubule, reabsorbs sodium ion and water. Remember, all of this reabsorption and secretion happens only when the nephron tubules have been instructed to either reabsorb or secrete a substance. At this point, we'll summarize all we've been learning today. We started by saying homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment within the bodies of living organisms. We also said homeostasis is controlled basically by the brain and the endocrine system in a control mechanism. So organs that play major roles in homeostasis are the liver, the kidney, skin, lungs, and the endocrine glands. And in this lesson, we learned about the kidneys. We said the kidneys are bean-shaped organs that are responsible for the formation of urine, regulation of body fluids, and the regulation of electrolyte concentration. Quickly, I'd like to find out if you learned something from this lesson. And I'll do this by taking this question. Which of the following is not found in the kidneys? A. Loop of Henle. B. Adrenal pelvis. C. Medulla. And D. Nephron tubules. If your answer was option B, you are correct. Adrenal pelvis is not found in the kidneys. Rather, we have the renal pelvis. The second question. Which of these is not absorbed in the nephron tubule? A. Sodium ion. B. Water. C. Blood cell. And D. Glucose. The correct answer here is C. Blood cell. The nephron tubules do not reabsorb blood cells. We have come to the end of today's class. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you enjoyed the teachings on the maintenance of internal environments. I would like to have you in our next class where we get to talk more about the kidneys and other organs of homeostasis. Until then, thank you.